a lot of times with the old system, by the time we made a decision, it almost felt like it was too late. And with Paradigm, we're able to kind of get ahead of some of these decisions. And, we've eliminated products because of the history of the products and how we buy them in. We've switched suppliers because we've seen that, we're using way more of this. And if we shop around and we save 5%, it's going to really affect how much we sell in the future. The props that I give to Paradigm is that they've built a platform that people can truly be excited about, It usually exceeds people's expectations. I've gone back and talked to people and said, hey, I've recommended them. How do you feel about it? And I've never gotten anything but, man, it's so much better than we thought, right?
Triad Building Components. Tell me about what y'all do.
So Triad was founded in 2016. We started manufacturing laminated building columns for mostly post-frame buildings, some commercial applications. We started in small town of Victor, Montana, just south of Missoula, on the southwestern end of the state. And we started in late 16, and we started manufacturing laminated columns. And in late 2018, we started manufacturing metal roofing and siding, commercial applications, as well as post frame and residential applications as well.
Cool. And your role there?
I'm co-owner, co-founder. I sit in as the operating manager for the Idaho Falls location, and then we also have a separate operating manager for the Montana location.
Cool. So tell me about your typical day. What does that look like, and how are you using the Paradigm tool in your day-to-day operation?
Well, let me first maybe start with telling you what we were using.
Sure.
We were using just the Quickbooks, kind of the best version of Quickbooks that we could. Which I think it might be manufacturing on the QuickBooks side. And it from a point of sale system, it was fine. When a customer comes in, you're able to quickly check them out. What it didn't do is it wasn't able to kind of do what we call maybe like a mixing bowl formula, right? So it wasn't able to track inventory very well. The columns that we make and a lot of things we make, it's taking one master coil or one bunk of lumber, and it's breaking them up into smaller pieces of various lengths and sizes, and to make one component. So what Paradigm's allowed us to do is really to keep our kind of dialed into the frequency in terms of the running inventory, managing the day-to-day operations in terms of cost of labor that we get to build into the system. It's really given us the visibility to make decisions weekly or even sometimes daily versus quarterly and yearly. Right. So it's really sped up that process. So when we're watching things like, month over month sales, year over year sales, we're looking at inventory numbers compared to last year. Wages compared to the total overall sales. It's just given us a ton of visibility, and I'll say this: I think we're still learning. 3+ years into Paradigm, we're still not fully probably utilizing every aspect of it because we just keep layering different reports, and we're kind of surprised. Oh, we can use this report to build kind of this dashboard, so to speak. So the typical day for me, it typically starts with coming in the morning, looking over the schedule from the delivery schedule as well as the production schedule. And then I kind of dive into the inventory. I look at the inventory on hand. What are some of the inventory that we're fighting to get in, especially since 2020, 2021, we've been really dealing with that. So I look at my inventory. I usually create my purchase orders where they need to go first thing in the morning. And then typically mid-morning, I've got a series of meetings with the production managers, general managers, things like that. And then in the afternoon, I'd switch my focus into doing more administrative stuff like receiving in purchase orders, making sure that the P&L statement is looking correctly if they see any discrepancies on that. So I'm kind of digging into that. But I probably spend about 60 to 70% of my day on Paradigm, either looking at inventory reports, high level management from that side, or even sometimes I'll get up to the front counter and help bring a customer in and quote a project for them as well.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So you're pretty involved in all parts of the operation.
Yeah, I am. And when we started out, we had we're counting myself, we had 3 employees. So we wore many, many hats. And that's kind of been a running theme in the company. We don't we have people that are very we hire them in for very specific reasons. We have a controller, an accountant, stuff like that. But most of our people, we really try to cross train. So the people working in the front counter, they're well equipped and they can load customers if they need to. Because when you run a lean, kind of a little bit more of a lean shift at times due to holidays or people being off, becomes very valuable when the guy that's inputting orders can also go out and run a machine, right? So that's why we do what we do, and it's been very, very helpful. And I would say probably from the employee standpoint, it makes for a slightly maybe less monotonous day to day because they're doing different things at different times.
Yeah, absolutely. So you touched on this some. Is there more you could tell me about how your processes changed exactly from what you were using previously to
Yeah.
now getting into Paradigm?
I'd love to. So I'll give you an example of how we operated. When we had the old system, the old QuickBooks system, basically what we would do, we would go through the yard, meaning the shop. So each and every shop, we'd have to physically walk through each day to check our numbers, because what wasn't happening is, going back to that mixing bowl recipe, we were taking different ingredients, putting them into trying to get a final product. But what QuickBooks was never able to do, and quite frankly, we looked at 4 other companies. We were never really satisfied with another operating software that would really allow us to look at day to day what we call like lot tracking capabilities. And now it's just knocked a lot of time off, because what we would do in the past is we would walk through and, like I said, kind of get a visual for all the inventory on hand. But there's so many components. Like we now stock 10,000 or around there, different SKUs, components, things like that. So it's an awful lot, and it's very easy to miss things, and it's easy to run out of things when you can't physically keep your eye on things. So with the Paradigm system now, we're able to rely. I'll give you a prime example. This happened last week. My operations manager here in Idaho Falls, he came in and said, we're missing, it looks like an entire box of fasteners. Now, to put it in context, we have about 40 different colors. We have 3 different sizes and 2 different brands of fasteners. And so being off one box, out of 2,000 boxes doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but we were actually concerned because we're like, well, where's this box going to? Did the wrong customer get the wrong one? And when we walked out and actually did a physical check, we found that box had been put in the wrong shelf. So we're able to really find with Paradigm, the inventory is so accurate that when it's off, it's very easy to track from both. We can go in and look at the purchase history. We can look at where we sold it. And now you can start whittling down where that product may have gotten to, right? So it's just gotten so much easier from a not only a time saving, the time saving side of it, it's also gotten so much better at helping us make decisions. So for an example, we can now look at a product that may not move very quickly, and we do this now every 6 months. We'll look at a product, we'll look at the buying history, the selling history, how many customers are purchasing the product, and we've been able to manage inventory better. I would say buy more with less, because we've looked at products that in our mind we've thought, well, we sell a lot of this one product, but when we looked at it, it's down to 2 customers. They're not buying very much, but when they are buying, they might be buying a big quantity of it. So it's allowed us to buy a little bit better by going to those customers and saying, let's remove this great big bottom line inventory item, and you just give us an extra 3 to 4 weeks when you want to order it. Now we don't have to carry it, and they were fine with that. So it's allowed us to make those decisions, as an example, way faster, better. With the old QuickBooks system, we would have gone back kind of, I call it flying blindly. So you're traveling along, you get to the end of the 6-month period, you do an inventory, and you're quite surprised, right? Because you're like, wow, I didn't know we had this much inventory. And a lot of our inventory is in our slower move items. So what we've been able to do is say, with our biggest, fastest moving products, um, we're able to handle way more of that and then slim down all the other inventory. So that's just a few examples of that.
Yeah, and it definitely keeps your inventory dollars much more well used, well
Yeah.
utilized, and not tied up in places that you can't get them back. So
Yeah. And the importance, I mean, to kind of stress the importance of that, when you're a growing company, you need all the capital you can get. You really don't want to have a lot of dead inventory, so to speak. And so for us, having the ability to better manage that on a daily and weekly basis instead of waiting for 6 months and then seeing that, oh, we've got an extra, $60,000, $70,000 of inventory tied up in an item where we sell $40,000 worth of it a year. It's allowed us to be so much more efficient on that side of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Any other key modules or parts of the Paradigm system that you're using? Are you doing using delivery components at
Yeah.
all? Do you have the contractor portal set up? What else are you
Yeah. So a
utilizing?
couple other things that we're using, and we're just keep in mind we're still starting. So the way we unrolled Paradigm, I would highly recommend this, and I've recommended this to other people that are looking for a point of sale software. I think what worked for us was bringing the software in, setting it up, but not necessarily worrying about the accuracy on year one, right? No, we're going to try, but we built the SKUs, we have the system up and running, we're going to use it. And I look at that first year like almost like a practice run. And that's exactly what we did. At the end of the first year, we did an inventory. We weren't off by a lot. Like I'm saying, we might have been off 10 or 15%, which was still relatively good for the first year. But then we had a system, we kind of developed a system where we had a list of checks and balances where we would say what was working and what wasn't in which categories. And then the second year, what we were able to do is hone in on the accuracy part of it. Uh, and really, I would say year two really got, I would say we whittled that process down to where we were probably in the 97, 98% accuracy. Year three, we've started unrolling stuff like the customer portal, contractors are now ordering. So that hasn't been going on a long time, but we do really like that. We've had a couple contractors now that have been using it. And again, the reason I'm telling you this, we're going, we kind of are structured as a company. When we roll something out, we want to do it slowly and learn quickly from that instead of just jumping all in with all the customers. There's a few customers we wanted to understand the portal in a way that we can tell some of the other customers that aren't as detail minded. We can kind of tell them what to watch for. So that's kind of where we're at in that range right now. But I would say on the side of the customer portal, I think it's probably one of the biggest, probably the biggest kind of bolt-on product that you can get on Paradigm, because it's saved us a ton of inputting time. It gives the customer the freedom and the flexibility of putting the orders in as they need them, while also giving them the responsibility of putting them in correctly, right? So there's not as many errors when it comes to, oh, I heard this, or especially most of our customers were putting them in on the phone. So there's a lot of room for error on that. So we're using that. We started using the delivery module as well last year, late fall. We've honed that process in. We're very happy with it so far. But again, we're on the first year where I think at the end of this year, we're going to figure out exactly what we can do a little bit better in terms of the scheduling. But so far, really happy with that one as well.
Awesome. Cool. So I know you've only been in business since 2016, not a huge amount of time, but things do change, over a 7-8 year period. So any ways that the Paradigm system has kind of helped you adapt to changes in the market or changing demands, production demands, anything like that?
Well, yeah.
I guess it's a lot shorter since you've even implemented it. So I don't know if you're able to speak to that yet, but any ways that it's helped you adapt as the market changes?
Yeah, I think that since 2016, when we hit 2020 and the pandemic and everything else, it feels like we've aged 2-to-1 ratios. It feels like we've been in business for much longer because of some of the obstacles we faced with the shortages. A couple of ways that Paradigm has really helped us make split decisions very quickly. I'll give you a couple of examples of that. So because our inventory is being tracked with lots, it's coming in on a purchase order. We're tracking that. I'm able to see with a click of the button each line item what the profit margin is of that line item. So last week, this is a real scenario that I'll talk to you about. Last week, we had a customer call in. And he called in for a quote. So we did the estimate. I sent it back to him. He looked at it, gave me a call and said, hey, I really need to get this order today. But here's the problem. You're about 6% higher than the other customers, right? 6% is quite a bit in our business, right? Because we're dealing with lower margins on a lot of this product. But what I was able to do is very quickly compare the estimate that he had in front of him to ours, and I was able to find a few ways that we could slim this down, and I could still stay, you know, pretty cost effective for the customer. But I could do that by looking at exactly the purchase I had made on the metal, the bolt coil. I could do it on the fasteners, the trim. I could start to time the trim to see, well, how much wages I'd have to build into that invoice. I felt confident going back to that customer saying, we can price match this project. We were able to get the project and we delivered it 3 days later.
Wow.
And the reason I felt confident with that is because the system is accurate. So I know if I'm giving him that number saying, hey, we can do this, I wouldn't have had the confidence with the old system. And the reason I didn't is because, again, there was no way to really track it on a very, very granular level. Like, we couldn't have tracked each individual coil, right? So I would have been caught using like this weighted average method, wondering that, oh man, this is going to be really close on these two product line items. So that's one way that it has really caused us to adapt and be able to be very quick on our feet with that. I'd say the other way that it's been able to help us is if we look at our inventory list, we'll look at the products we sell the most. And in most cases, those are kind of loss leaders. We're not losing money on those products, but they're obviously a smaller margin. And the reason for that is everybody else carries them as well. What we've been able to do is use the history to buy better with Paradigm. So I can look at when the best time is to buy, when we're selling this product, when we're selling the most of it, use that to affect my buying, opportunities in the future. I'm also able to use that by playing with numbers, such as if I move my top two items and I take a bit of a margin hit on those two items, I can usually cost spread that margin onto other items. And what it's allowed me to do is when people call in, we know the questions they're going to ask, right? What's the lineal foot price of your metal? What's the price of your ice and water guard? With QuickBooks, we didn't have that history. We couldn't really comfortably say, well, this is how much we're making on each invoice with each customer, with each bracket. The other way that Paradigm's really helped us has been, in a sense, understanding the price level brackets and the costs associated to dealing with each price level. So we have different price levels for a stocking dealer, a contractor that just, builds in the field, might have a job or two. We have a different price level for the homeowner that walks in that says, hey, I just want maybe a roof project. That may be his only project. What we've been able to do with Paradigm is understand the costs associated with each bracket. And from a time standpoint, if I'm dealing with a homeowner, I'm going to have to factor in the cost of quoting the project, the cost of customer support, because we do support our customers once they purchase it. We want them to call us with any questions. Whereas the stocking dealer is very knowledgeable when it comes to talking to their customers. So they're taking that away from us, right? So with Paradigm, we've been able to hone in on each bracket and become very competitive, right? So for that homeowner, we might charge them a little bit more to make up for that time that we spend versus the stocking dealer where it's an email order, we're loading an entire truck and we're shipping that 5, 7, or 10 hours away. So those are just some of the things that we've been able to do. And it's really been helpful looking at it. Again, I look at Paradigm, it's a day-to-day system versus the year-to-year system is really. A lot of times with the old system, by the time we made a decision, it almost felt like it was too late. And with Paradigm, we're able to kind of get ahead of some of these decisions. And, we've eliminated products because of the history of the products and how we buy them in. We've switched suppliers because we've seen that, we're using way more of this. And if we shop around and we save 5%, it's going to really affect how much we sell in the future.
That's really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned when you made the selection, you compared, I think you said 4 other alternatives. What were kind of the main concerns that you were looking at when selecting your ERP system, and how'd you finally land on Paradigm and make that choice?
So the main concern that we had, it was quite happenstance. I'll tell you how I found Paradigm. And we were walking at a show in Cincinnati. And at the time we had chosen 3 suitors, as we often do. We had a team assembled to look at and break down what we're looking for. And I'll get into what we were looking for. But when I found Paradigm, I thought, well, why not throw them into the mix, right? And the reason I'm telling you that, what really stood out to me, it was the customer service side of it, right? So in talking to the team at Paradigm, I immediately found the differentiating factor is they understood our specific industry. Not only our industry, but they understood the products. When I talked about our SKUs, East Coast from West Coast, it was like they had already studied up on all of that, right? So I started talking about this to Derek and Jaden and the rest of the team, and I thought, well, this is really cool because when I'm talking about lot tracking on coils, the other much bigger sometimes, and we even looked at some smaller systems, they had no clue, right? They built this kind of four square box, and it was just a system that could essentially do what you needed it to do, but the support side of it was very difficult and challenging because they didn't really understand, without studying our industry, they really couldn't understand um, the challenges that we face day to day, right? And that's what Paradigm got. So what we look for at the top of the list, the very top of the list is there a good support system there? And we found out with Paradigm, not only is there a good support system there, they're very quick, they're very nimble. When we ask them for something that they don't have on the system, they work very hard to see if they can actually do this, right? We just had this example about 2 weeks ago where we said, we'd really like to see this feature and this function. They were able to build it and give that to us. So they do that very well. The second thing I would tell you, aside from that customer service, was just, like I said, understanding our product and our industry. And that's where I thought it was very solid too. And then the third thing just came down to, is the company big enough to handle, multiple location companies like ourselves, but are they small enough to care, right? And that's the feeling we got with Paradigm. They're big enough to handle uh, the inventory between two locations and the transfers that have to take place. I'll give you another, and it's just a slight bit off topic, a concern that we didn't have at the time, but this has been huge for us. So when we started in Montana, we had our one location, and there's no sales tax being charged, right? So the second location in 2023, when we started that location up, it's been a little over a year. And there's a lot of things we didn't know about starting a second location, taxing, right? Charging sales tax, keeping track of the inventory at both locations, and then also being able to transfer. We have trucks running back and forth multiple times a week. We have to be able to transfer that inventory without it being lost in the system. And that was another really strong point for Paradigm because they understood that there's other, I'm assuming there's other customers that have multiple locations for them. They had features built in, so when we have to transfer products from one to another, it's very seamless, right? I can throw it on a truck at the last minute. I can go in, log into Paradigm. I can transfer those two. By the time the truck shows up, it's showing up in their inventory. So when we were whittling this down, it became apparent to us very quickly on talking to Paradigm that they're, like I said, they're big enough to handle multiple locations. They're small enough to care about customers that maybe aren't, doing 50, 60, 80 million dollars plus a year. So that was just a few things. The other thing that kind of was the overarching feeling when we looked at other companies was there are teams that will do the sales part of that company, and then you don't talk to those teams anymore. They're going to hand you off to an internal kind of an auditing staff that looks at what you need, and then they hand you off to the implementation team, and then they hand you off to the customer service team, right? With Paradigm, it's very seamless. So you do get transferred from person to person, but you get the feeling everybody knows about each step of that journey where you're on, right? So you feel confident when you send an email to Paradigm or a phone call saying, we're experiencing this issue. You're talking to a team. It feels like, a relatively small team that understands what you're facing, right? The other thing I would tell you too, and then I'll kind of get off of that topic, but the other thing that Paradigm really helped us to do was scale the internal IT that we needed, right? We're not very IT friendly, as most people in construction. That's not our strong suit. We don't know that much about IT. We have an IT company that we work with, and really what we did was handed them off to Paradigm and said, here you go. They'll tell you what you need. Paradigm helped them set up, the server room, the infrastructure that we need from a technology standpoint to get exactly what we need. And I'm going to say that was probably the biggest concern I had with our second location. Like, how do we seamlessly make this transition? We went live at 9 o'clock a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and we didn't experience the first hiccup. It was seamless. It was flawless. So we were very happy with that. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always a good end to the story.
It is. Yeah, it is. And I think now, we have no plans to start 3, 4, 5 more locations. But if we were to do that, the system would be the least of our concerns, right? It would be location, it would be inventory, capital, those type of things would be concerns. Like, look, the system with Paradigm, I think it would run as smoothly with 10 or 15 locations as it would with 1 or 2. So
Wow.
that's kind of my feeling I get.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So you touched on it a bit. What the parts of the system that you're using? If you had to narrow it down, any specific favorites?
Yeah. I'll give you. Okay, that's really hard to do, right? Because I probably live in 7, what they call 7 reports and systems, right? But I'll try to narrow it to 3 for this. The first one I use is just from an owner's perspective is the reports on the day-to-day sales and profitability. That is really important. When you have 40 employees and your sales starts to dwindle down in the fall, and you've got to make plans to we've never laid off any employees, but we have to start making plans to do maintenance, right? We've got to start making plans to prepare for inventory. The day-to-day sales activity is at the very top of my list. The second one I use is the P&L report. It's a very clean P&L. We were able to customize it to exactly what we need to see, right? So we don't like to when we look at a report, we try, if it's a 3-page report, we try to get that down to 1 page, right? Just for simplicity's sake. We were able to do that with the P&L. So that's probably the second one. I look at that halfway through the month, sometimes weekly, other times daily, but especially at the end of the month, where all the receipts are filed. And we're able to look very, very closely at the exact net profit for that month. And it's helping us make decisions on new products, investments, things like that on a monthly basis. That's the second one. The third one I would look at is overall, I mean, there's 4 in this category, but I'm going to put it as an inventory category. And that is such as, if I have 10,000 units of a particular product on the floor, do I need 10,000 units? How much am I selling? Who am I selling it to? What's my profit margin? What are my highs and lows in terms of selling that product from January versus August when we're really busy? So I use that as probably the third one. So when I say inventory, there's a lot of elements in inventory, but primarily it's the history report of each item. That's what I'm looking at, right? So I start off on the overarching inventory, the total inventory valuation. That can fluctuate wildly from week to week. But being able to look at that from an individual product standpoint is really helpful making decisions on the direction of the inventory. So those are the top 3. A couple more that I do use and I really find helpful. One would be looking at stuff like wages to sales. It's a very common one that we look at, right? So we're going to hire another guy on the floor. Well, let's look at comparative numbers last year. When we did 2 million, as an example, using round numbers, if we did 2 or 3 million in the month of August, how many employees did we have? What was our wage impact to that amount of sales? And then we can start to decide, are we really being effective, or are we just saying we might feel like we need something? And we can look at, real life scenarios. Because with Paradigm, again, it's all about history. And we knew that when we started, we didn't have any history on Paradigm. So we had to build that. And in the past 3 years, we've been able to build it to the point to where I can sit here and say, based on last 2 years' numbers, I know where we're going in September, because I'm comparing them. And if every month is falling to where I see that it should be, I can just extrapolate that over the end of the year and I can get to some good numbers. So our accountants really love us now compared to what they used to. When we get into the in the old days, 10, 15 employees, we'd get into the end of the year and we'd go to file all of our taxes. And there's many, 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 many surprises for the accountants. They would look at it and go, well, hang on, how are we only knowing that in December? And we'd have to say, well, we didn't have those data. We didn't have the numbers in January, March, August, and so forth. So I'd say those are just some of the ways that it's been able to really help us as a company, I think. And it's really been really helpful We have biannual meetings with the leadership team, and that's where we really use those numbers, looking at sales numbers, where are we at, looking at inventory, and we've been able to build almost the uh, our wage structure for some of our operating managers. We've been able to build that looking at the history, right, and saying, if we can do a little bit better on inventory, there's a bit of a bonus there for each manager. So we've been able to get, I would say, about as good as we can on that stuff.
Yeah, and if your ERP system can turn into like employee morale benefits, like that's an amazing,
Yeah.
side
Yeah.
side bonus that you kind of get with a system like that. It's not usually what you think about when you're running the numbers on something like that. But
Yeah.
speaking of running the numbers, I know this is probably really hard to quantify, um, but in terms of cost savings, efficiency, any idea what kind of the bottom line impact of the Paradigm system is for your business?
Well, you're right. It'd be really hard to quantify that, really, because there's so many different elements to that, right? There's the wages, there's the inventory, there's the purchasing. It would be hard for me to put a number, but I'll give you examples. We've been able to minimize inventory by 20%. We've been able to reduce wages probably in the neighborhood of 15 to 20% while increasing our wages to each individual employee, right? Because we can now put the right people in the right spots and start to make those decisions. It's probably hard to quantify an exact number, but if I were to let's talk about it from this perspective. If I were to keep a team of people in our old system, it would take 2 or 3 people full time to get me the constant reports that I need to make the decision that I'm going to make to kind of hobble along with that old system. So I don't know how you put a number to that, but what I would feel comfortable saying is it would take a few people full time. And let's also talk about something else briefly. So this is where Paradigm's understanding of our industry and our products goes. So when we put, as an example, this might be kind of hard to understand from the outside, but when people order metal roofing and siding, there's typically anywhere from 15 to 30 different lengths per order, right? Paradigm understood this and said, okay, so it's going to be the same color most of the time. So they have a couple tab through functions that all we have to do is just keep tabbing through and putting our feet and inches in. So every order that we're putting in, we're not spending time like the old system copying and pasting SKUs. So just those little things we kind of take for granted now, 3 years in, save 10, 15 minutes per order. And we're looking at anywhere from 50 to 300 orders a day, big and small. It just depends, really. Maybe that's a little bit high, but 50 to 100, right? So just think of the time from a 5 to 10, 15 minutes from a small order to a big order with some of those functions. The other thing, when a customer walks in and says, hey, I don't remember what this color was, but a year ago we did a project in Billings, and I can't remember, and I don't want to drive over there. We can, with a click of a button, tell you how many feet, inches, what that project ran, what the profit margin was, if that project increased in price or decreased. And we can give the customer that data to make those decisions, which has been really, really helpful. With the old system, it was just so cumbersome. You'd spend an hour or two, which ultimately ended up with the employee saying, man, we'll get this information to you, but it's going to be a day or two. And the customer usually just give up and say, I'll just go look at it, right? So those are just some of the ways, that we see that it's saved us time and efficiency. The other thing I really didn't even step into, we used to print papers. When we placed an order, we'd have to print paper. We'd have to take that paper, make sure it doesn't get lost in the system. We'd hand it to our production manager in the morning. So the production manager would then give it to the appropriate people. They would do it and then bring that back in the office, put it in a file. And inevitably you had papers getting lost, orders getting lost in the shuffle. Or even worse, we pride ourselves on doing rush orders. When a customer walks in, we want to get that order done quickly, and we want to surprise that customer with good customer service and do it quickly. With Paradigm, we've been able to go completely paperless, right? So the only time we print a paper off is a customer standing in front of us and want to pay their bill. They might want to look at a statement, so we'll do that. But with the driver app, completely paperless. We can attach pictures to it. Um, the flow through from putting an order in to watching it get completed and picked in the shop is so efficient. This morning we had a customer call me and he goes, "Hey, that order that I put in, I need to add 2 pieces." And I'm thinking, okay, so I just opened Paradigm, I looked at it, it was locked, but it wasn't done yet. So I was able to unlock that, sneak 2 pieces into that job, release it back into manufacturing, and the guy in the shop was none the wiser, right? He's just looking at the order, and it's just automatically done. So that's another hugely beneficial thing that we've been able to see. So, how do you quantify that? I don't know. I don't know how you even put that into perspective because we would go through, I mean, literal reams of paper, right? We'd print 100, 200, 300, 400 pages of paper off a day, and trying to keep track of that versus now going totally electronic, it's so much easier. That's saying a lot. I'm not very keen on, going to the next best thing. I kind of get stuck in my ways and I like doing it the old way. But when my team looked at it, they said, well, this is a no-brainer. We have to go paperless. And I said, well, I'll let you guys try it, right? Let's do a little beta test and try it. And they tried it. And we haven't even gone back from that. We just went full steam ahead from that little test that we did. So it was very, very helpful for us. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome, man. I know like I said, can't tough to quantify, but even
Yeah.
those anecdotes kind of shed some light on
Yeah.
yeah, it, you can extrapolate and figure out the nature of the impact that it's having.
Yeah.
So
And I've said it's a paradigm too. I'm no way feel like we're just a customer paradigm, right? Um, Paradigm's been able to take something, I think, a need in the industry and cater it such that when you get a customer, we get it in front of a customer. I've said this Paradigm, just get it in front of a customer. Have a customer call me because I can tell a customer in my industry the 3 biggest things they struggle with because I know I've lived the life. I know this. And if I can have 5 minutes of that customer, I can tell them exactly how this is going to change their life. And that is really nice. I mean, there's a lot of products that we interact with, especially now in the digital age. There's a lot of products that I interact with that are, like, they're okay, right? They do. Like, it's like you're not unhappy with them, but you're not really ecstatic with them. Paradigm develops in a way that you're really excited when they roll something out because you're like, wow, I know this is going to be good because I'm looking back at the history, right? So that's kind of what they've done, I think. And the props that I give to Paradigm is that they've built a platform that people can truly be excited about. It usually exceeds people's expectations. I've gone back and talked to people and said, hey, I've recommended them. How do you feel about it? And I've never gotten anything but, man, it's so much better than we thought, right? Initially, it's hard. It's hard to get onto an ERP system that really works. That's a lot of work. But if you do the work and you put it in, you are going to be happy with the end result.
that's great feedback.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any answers to this question. Just wrapping up here, but any things off the top of your head that you think could be further improved or customized in the system, or even just in terms of, I know you've spoken very highly of their customer service, but anything that can be improved upon that you haven't shared with them yet?
Boy, that's tough. I'd have to think about that honestly for a little bit because I'm trying to think of things that they can't do that I would like to have done, right? So what is that? Um, I really, it'd be really tough for me to think. To be totally honest with you. Um,
Well,
it's
I guess if
I think what we see with the update, one of the okay, here's a prime one that I was going to recommend, but I can't because they did it. Whenever Paradigm pushed an update, right? They would push an update, and we understood things have to be updated. So in the morning, all the computers would have to be manually updated. About 3 months ago, this was kind of an issue to us because you're coming in the morning. The last thing the guy wants to do on the production line is open his laptop or his workstation and run an update, right? And then heaven forbid the update doesn't go right. They were able to come in and do an automatic update. So now it's doing it while we sleep. When we open it, we see a little thing on the screen, a little message that says Paradigm is being updated. Hang tight. 10 seconds later, the system is up and running. So there's not a lot that I can say that could be improved. I mean, I'm sure they can come out with some other stuff that could be improved, but there's not a lot because, again, I think with the feeling we get with Paradigm is when they do roll something out, there's always going to be improvement. It's just kind of continuous improvement, and they hone in on that system, you know.
cool. So you touched on this briefly, but looking ahead, what's the future look like for Triad? How does Paradigm fit into that? Or what's
Yeah.
for y'all?
Well, I think again we have no thoughts right now of starting a third or fourth location, but we didn't have 3 years ago we had no thoughts of starting a second location. This location's been great. It's been going very well. It's exceeded our expectations in terms of sales. I think we picked a great market. I could see Triad ending up with 3 or 4 locations pretty quickly. This system has allowed us to scale very effectively. So when we started the second location, my biggest challenge mentally, my mental block was how am I going to, as an owner, make decisions running 2 locations with one system? And all the nuances that come with that, like, how many employees you're going to have employ at both locations, how many trucks are you going to need, how much inventory, how do we scale that, right? And now when we start thinking about a third, fourth location, that's really that's nowhere near the front of our mind. I mean, it's really, now we know that if it goes as smoothly on the third and fourth, which I don't doubt that it will, the technology side and our ERP system will be the least of our worries. We're going to be able to scale that and do that effectively and efficiently.
Awesome. That's the end of the questions on my list. One that I don't have here, but I'm just going to put out there. I'm doing a construction project in Montana or Idaho. Give me your pitch.
All right. So first of all, I'm assuming by construction, you're saying, post-frame buildings, commercial buildings, something in our realm. So
tell me what you do and why I should go with you.
So what Triad does better than anybody else on the market today is we're able to quote a project, carry the inventory that you may need, and I'm saying every piece and part that you need for that project. We're able to deliver it to your job site from the quoting side of it to getting it to the job site quickly and efficiently. I believe we can do it better than anybody, in Idaho and Montana right now, because we are set up now to deliver. We have a load going to Carson City, Nevada, which is about 10 hours away. We're able to drop 4 projects off this morning in Carson City, Sparks, Reno area. Because we have all the parts and pieces, we can quote them out. We can turn a quote into an order, into production, into deliveries in 3 to 4 days. And so we're able to help you not only find what you need, we're able to help you quote the project and how many pieces and parts that's needed. We have systems in place now that can turn, like I said, an average quote into material on your job site, damage-free, ready to go in about 4 or 5 days at a maximum. So that would be my pitch to a new customer.
Awesome. That's super helpful.